Greetings, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I think we'll go ahead and get started for the Echo-Seymour Lake Watershed Action Plan presentation of the final report, as well as some initial designs and really focusing on next steps. My name is Barbara Campbell. I work for the Orleans County Conservation District as the Lake Shoreline Coordinator and Community Engagement Coordinator. I'm hoping you guys know about the Orleans County Conservation District. We've been around since 1946, helping land stewards and farmers with water and soil quality issues. And we've been doing a lot of lake shoreline work along with our amazing colleagues at MWA, the Memphremagog Watershed Association, which is really hard for me to say. So please excuse me if I just call them MWA. Again, if you want to be on our mailing list, put your information in the chat, unless you already get emails from us. We're going to hold the Q&A to the end. And I'm going to try to fire up my slides here. Good. Great. So I will, I introduce myself. I'm joined today by my two amazing colleagues from MWA, and I'll let them introduce themselves when they begin to speak. And also the Lake Association leadership and water quality advocates that have been so instrumental in helping us do this, LWAP. We're hoping this meeting only takes an hour and a half. We definitely want to leave lots of time for your reflections. Consider it a good opportunity to ask questions and almost like the initiation of your brainstorming session on what you want to do with this actionable plan. So first of all, I do want to thank a lot of people. I want to thank all of you for your interest and participation in the LWAP, and specifically some of your Lake Association leaders. Tom and Holly from Echo have been just super helpful to us. Peggy and Tracy and Rhonda from Seymour, helping us do boat tours and communicate and strategize. And their commitment to your lake associations is really impressive. They spend a lot of time pushing forward these water quality issues. So you guys are lucky, and we're lucky too. I also want to thank the 12 families that gave us the time to do lake-wise assessments. I'm hoping, I don't know if any of you are here. We also want to thank the staff and town people of Charleston and Morgan, including Colleen Kellogg, Charleston Assistant Town Clerk. She was just amazing and communicating with us and getting the select board on board. She's really super helpful. And also Wendell Hastings, Terry Rollins and Eric Pope, Bruce Remick, Larry Labor, and Peter and Tim, just all been really helpful. We know you guys are all really busy and have many important priorities, and we're really glad that you're putting the time towards this agenda. And finally, I want to thank my amazing colleagues at MWA, Patrick and Gabby. If we were all together in person, I'd give them a standing ovation. They're awesome to work with, as you guys all know. They've done so much of the legwork, the data processing, and report writing for this project. So it's always a pleasure to work with those guys, those two. Our agenda. So the objectives, our main goal is to convey the actionable nature of this plan and to share the next steps for you guys to move forward with this amazing content we've gathered, and to really allow for questions, comments, and reflections. Like I said, this could kind of be the initiation of your brainstorming opportunity. So the agenda, I'll review the LWAP process to date real quickly, and then Gabby will review how we did the field work, which we call the assessments, and the whole project prioritization, which we presented this past summer. And Gabby, make sure you introduce yourselves. And then Patrick will take it over. Oh, does someone need to mute? I hear somebody. Someone's talking. Pano, can you mute? I can mute her. Right. Oops. Mute. There we go. Okay. Oops, boy. Okay. Then Patrick will present the top 4 projects that we did 30% design, which just means preliminary designs, and what it looks like moving toward implementation or installation of these type of projects. And then Patrick will segue into presenting the final plan, like basically just an overview of that and what some of the broader recommendations that are in there. In those next steps, I will also then talk about how, this process of implementation and then let the lake associations chime in with their ideas about what they'd like to do next. And then we'll wrap up with public input and questions and a survey. I do have a really, really quick survey. I will put that link in the chat. And if you just could click on it at some point and have that tab open or copy the link, you can maybe fill it out afterwards, after we're done. So, 1, 2, that's the agenda. So, quick review. What is an LWAP? It's many things. It's a tool, it's a process, and it's a report. So they call it a Lake Watershed Action Plan. It's an assessment and planning tool. It allowed us to look at a sub-watershed, the Echo watershed, which includes both lakes, and look at it in a comprehensive way and do this full assessment of the roads, the streams, and the shorelines, the farms, anything hydrologically connected, at the same time getting your community input and your sense of prioritization. So we use this as a tool to collect this information about what are the greatest threats to water quality in your watershed. So it's been a 2-year process. We launched last summer. We've had public meetings. And then today we present the draft of the final report. There's many other deliverables, and those are all in a public folder, and this should be available on both of our websites, which includes the project summaries, which is also a really nice way of just looking at everything that was identified. So we have a grant from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and that comes with specific guidelines for us about our deliverables, and that includes a data library, maps, this final report. We were required to identify and prioritize 30 projects. I think the grand list is 100, and do 10 lake-wise assessments. And then create these 30% or preliminary designs for the top 3 projects. We ended up doing 4, just so we could do 2 for each lake. So that is kind of the summary of the LWAP. If you haven't been with us throughout this whole process, at the beginning of the chat, I put in something I call a 1-pager, a fact sheet that kind of summarizes the timeline and what an LWAP is. So that's in the chat. And so now I am going to hand it over, making sure I'm in the right place, hand it over to Gabby and Patrick from MWA. So Gabby's going to just review really quickly how they did the field work, how they prioritized the projects, and then Patrick will talk about the top 4 projects and move into that final report and broader recommendations. So Gabby, if you would take it away, I'll stop sharing. And if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great. This is Gabrielle Giannoni from MWA.
Bevan said, my name is Gabrielle Giannoni, or Gabby for short. Patrick, if you don't mind pulling up the slides. And then we can get rolling on just a brief overview of the field assessments and our core project areas, and then how we prioritized all those project opportunities that we came across. All right, some beautiful shots of the lakes. Love it. I want to just say I am truly blessed to be able to do these field assessments in such an awesome watershed. You guys are champions of your lakes, and it really shows. And it's just really nice to be out on the landscape and run into you all and have pleasant conversations. So thank you for your support and just being incredible. All right, and yeah, go ahead, Patrick. And like Bevan said, I am the project coordinator for MWA. I did take on a majority of the stream assessments and road assessments. So we have these core assessment areas that include stream walks, riparian assessments, these really intense stream geomorphic assessments that really just capture the whole picture of a stream system. And then we also have lake shoreland, lake-wise assessments that focus on, again, the lake shore. And then we have private road and driveway and public road assessment areas as well. So we basically get out into the watershed, scouring all those assessment areas, looking for opportunities to improve water quality and habitat. For our stream walks and riparian assessments, we got out on all the streams that we proposed, and plus some more. We just couldn't help ourselves, so we went overboard. But we could, there's just plenty of opportunity. There was no lack there. So we did identify some potential project opportunities. We create project summaries for those, identifying the problem area and then what that issue is and how we can remedy that with a solution of best management practices. So some of those potential projects that came out of our stream walks and riparian assessments were riparian buffer plantings, culvert upgrades, floodplain, stream, and wetland restoration opportunities, some forest gully stabilization opportunities, invasive species, trash and dam removal projects as well, just to name a few. We were able to complete 2 stream geomorphic assessments on both Valley Brook and Sucker Brook. We targeted both of those streams because they're one of the 2 largest perennial streams in the watershed, and we are also completing completing designs for 4 culvert upgrades on Valley Brook, and then for Sucker Brook, we're proposing a floodplain restoration project. So collecting that extra data on the streams and really understanding how those systems works really can inform our designs a lot better. And have a more thorough product for design and implementation. For the lakeshore land assessments, we were able to get out on both lakes and scour both lake shores. We found a whole bunch of opportunities ranging from buffer plantings to stabilization and restoration projects. You can see there's only 6 projects identified there. There's plenty more opportunities identified as well that weren't large enough to warrant grant funding for this process, but we still identified them and flagged them for small buffer plantings, creating no mow zones, so we're not mowing all the way up to the lake shores. These are just small things that individual lake owners can take ownership and stewardship of their own land to improve water quality and lake shore stabilization. So even though there's 11 there, there's plenty more that were listed. For lake-wise assessments, the Orleans Conservation District really killed it and did 12 properties and had all 12 of those properties receive awards or certifications, 4 awards on Lake Echo, and 1 certification as well. And then for Lake Seymour, 4 awards and 3 certifications. And then lastly, for our roads, our private roads and driveways surveys, came out to 22 road erosion reduction projects. Those are roads that are unstable and outletting sediment directly to surface waters. We pulled them out to stabilize and disconnect and propose disconnection practices for that stormwater runoff. The same thing goes for public roads. We identified 21 road erosion projects, again, focused on making sure that road runoff is going to the right place, it's slowing down, it's filtering sediment, roads are graded properly, ditches are as well, and disconnected from surface waters as well. So Patrick, go ahead and get to the next one. All right, so we identified 100 potential projects that will be uploaded to the watershed project database for further development. We originally at our last prioritization meeting had 94. We couldn't help ourselves. We had to add 6 more, get that whole 100. In the graph there, you can see the project is divided out and distributed by type. So roads, again, is really taking that lead for project opportunities to improve water quality, and then followed by buffer plantings and floodplain and stream restoration. Next slide. Here's a map showing all of those locations of the projects by type. I just want to mention that you guys will have access to these project summary locations. They will be on our data library. It'll be a purple star on that map. And then if you click on the purple star, it'll pull up information about the problem and then what the best management practices are to remedy that situation. So you can see that, oh, go ahead, one more back. And you can see a lot of these project triangles are clustered around certain areas, a lot on Toad Pond Road, West Echo Lake Road, Wacies, just to name a few. These are areas that were heavily impacted by the flood, the past 4 floods. So identifying these projects before the floods and then going back and reassessing them multiple times to make sure that we've got the full picture. I just wanted to note that. And here is a graphic of the water quality stressor by sector. We basically, for every project opportunity, we calculated the possible phosphorus reduction value of each best management practice. And what do you know, roads floated to the top again with a 53% of contribution of phosphorus reduction by sector, followed by stream and floodplain restoration at 21%, and wetlands and and sorry, forestry as well. And that you can notice that picture down there, it may be small, but you can really see the impacts of a whole road washing out. That's West Echo Lake Road, washing out straight into a stream and going down a culvert straight to the lake. So we can see our roads were the issues here, and the data really supports it. So the goals for water quality improvement projects prioritize in the whole watershed. So if we were able to get all of these 100 projects done and implemented, we could have phosphorus inputs reduced by 143 pounds annually, which is actually incredible. And then that equates to reducing 200 and about 50 tons annually of sediment going straight to the lake. So those are really big goals there. It seems like a lot, but it is achievable if you take on small projects every year. They add up really quickly. And the other proposals that we have were 10,500 linear feet of proposed buffer plantings to enhance riparian and lakeshore buffers. We proposed 14.6 acres of floodplains and wetlands to restore, and just under 3/4 of an acre of agricultural runoff on ag properties to manage, which it seems pretty manageable, not too many acres there. And then for roads and driveway practices, we'd like to upgrade those road erosion best management practices on about 10 miles of road. Again, it seems like a lot, but it is definitely, if you do it piece by piece, they add up very quickly. And just taking a few projects a year, it will definitely add up. Go ahead. All right, so we, like I said, we kind of crunched a few numbers. We crunched a lot of numbers, actually, not just phosphorus calculations. We want to put values to all of these project summaries so that we can compare them across the board. So we create this project prioritization criteria for evaluation. So we assign a point system for our water quality benefits. We'll give a few points for landowner support and cost and feasibility of that project, and then as well as O&M and longevity. And then we give a few points for co-benefits, which are different improvements that could be made to the environment or the communities that add some extra points and benefits. But overall, water quality benefits are really what we're looking at here. The whole point of the LWAP process is to identify stressors in the community or in the watershed that are reducing or that are adding to increasing trends in phosphorus. So those phosphorus load reduction and the sediment retention points, account for 9 points out of that maximum 36. And, that's why we're here today. So we crunched all those numbers, we compared them across the board for those 100 projects, and then we were able to prioritize or have a list of 30 projects prioritized. Patrick, you can go next slide. So here's our distilled data. We normally have a huge, ugly prioritization Excel. We want to shield you from that. This is the nice, easy to understand slide of our top priority projects. You can see there are stars on some of these projects. The yellower stars are the projects that were picked for to be continued for 30% design. That will be presented in a second. And then the darker orange stars are projects that are initiated outside of the LWAP process, which is exciting to see that a lot of projects in our top 30 are proceeding forward, and we love to see that momentum. We can go next slide. And here are our 30% conceptual design projects. We have Sucker Brook SMA, Stream Bank Management Area, Floodplain Restoration off Valley Road in Morgan. We have the road erosion best management practices on West Echo Lake Road in Charleston, and then the road erosion BMPs on Toad Pond Road in Morgan. And then lastly, the Echo Lake access area best management practices off of West Echo Lake Road in Charleston. And I will leave the rest of it to Patrick to review the designs.
Thank you, Gabby. So as Gabby mentioned, sorry, I'm Patrick Hurley. I'm with the Memphremagog Watershed Association. I'm the project manager over here at MWA. And as Gabby mentioned, I'd like to echo it has been a true pleasure to work in your communities and in your watershed. It's been a a bit of a whirlwind with all the flood damage. It makes our job easier and harder. So thanks for bearing with us. A lot of you are look familiar just from being out and about in the streams and walking the roads and talking to you after the flood. So I'm happy to hear and see that people are still engaged and interested in this process. I want to take a step back and tell you about this design effort. So we had budget in our contract to do 3 designs. We wanted to do a 4th design to make sure each lake got two products out of this effort. You will see that maybe some of these projects aren't essentially the most phosphorus lucrative project, and that is because there are other things besides phosphorus that dictate feasibility of a project, whether you have landowner support, whether it is eligible for non-regulatory voluntary clean water grants, whether it's a violation of some other permit rule or requirement where we can't spend, non-regulatory money fixing a violation of some sort. So the designs that we developed are here to be a launching point for taking that design to the next level, to get to 100% design, so that we can seek, permits and funding for implementing these projects. For the town road projects, that's a gray area. Those are regulatory projects, right? We are still mandated to identify those opportunities and quantify them and qualify them, but we're limited in how much grant funding MWA or the Conservation District can get to bring toward implementing this work, because they are requirements from the municipal roads general permit. However, we chose these 2 projects, these 2 roads for designs, because they were so important and disproportionately high sediment and phosphorus sources, right? And towns don't have a lot of money for technical evaluations, technical assistance, for doing, analyses, drainage and runoff analyses. And so we decided that it would be the best use of our in-house expertise, our capabilities, and our time to essentially provide designs for these town roads that the towns can implement without really needing to take them to full 100% designs or full engineering scopes of work. This is something that the town road foremen can implement, chip away at these target areas, not do it in necessarily a wholesale fashion, but do what they can when they can, based on available funding, based on construction schedules. So it was determined that we would be working on these projects. The other thing you'll see is there are 2 fish and wildlife properties, and there are 2 municipal roads. What we found in this watershed is there's a lot of small properties with very little footprints. They may have lots of opportunities for best management practices, but collectively they're not large phosphorus reduction practices, or they are not technically challenging or complex projects. We're not going to spend our design budget designing a little buffer planting for a 50-foot long, 15-foot wide shoreline buffer planting. That is something that we have the resources, you have the resources to be able to implement that work without this complex design. It doesn't require permitting. So this is why we're focusing on public lands that have public access, that we know we can get, that have large phosphorus reduction targets, that have economy of scale built into these designs. So I just want to set that stage before we go into the specifics. So we're going to start on Sucker and Valley Brook. This is at the bottom of Valley Road. This is immediately upstream from the Seymour Lake access area. This has been a property of interest for MWA and Fish and Wildlife for quite some time. We just recently closed on a conservation acquisition. You can see these 2 streams coming and meeting down here just before the Route 111 bridge. Fish and Wildlife Department just closed on 8 acres of that floodplain stream corridor. Is now a public access area, and we intend to do some restoration work on it, primarily to reconnect floodplain, reconnect floodplains. So it took a 1,000-year flood for this floodplain to be activated. And you can see on the right panel, a lot of sediment came down from Toad Pond Road through Sucker Brook and landed on this property. This is a beautiful thing to us. This is deposition of sediment and retention of phosphorus on a floodplain. It's doing what it should be. But we'd like to see it happening more than every 1,000 years, right? And so these designs are trying to engender more frequent floodplain connection, more frequent floodplain activation. You also see that this is mostly herbaceous vegetation. It's not very dense, it's not woody. We'd like to establish more of a forest in this site. This property was, or this parcel was so overwhelmed with sediment that it clogged up the channel at one point and it jumped down a neighboring property and took out a driveway. And we kind of combined this design to address flood mitigation as well as restoration. So there's a lot going on in these slides. I'm not going to go over every single detail. They are all available for you to pore over. Bevan and I will be sure to provide links to all of these, but essentially water's flowing from right to left in this panel. And these red little squigglies are proposed berm notches. So whether it was intentional or unintentional, there are berms along the bank of this stream which prevent water from exiting the channel and accessing the floodplain. So those little red squigglies, 1, 2, 3, 4, are flood chutes that we would essentially cut a notch through the bank and allow water to disperse more broadly at a more frequent interval. The green polygons, these are all proposed woody buffer planting areas. You see up here in the bottom right corner, this is where the river jumped out of its channel and ran down that private property and blew out Water Street. Essentially, we would propose reconnecting a flood chute here and building a bit of a flood levee to try to prevent that from happening again. So, and this is only one portion of the project. The other portion would be up on Valley Road, just a couple hundred yards away, right above and below Old Blake Farm Road. There's great opportunities here for widening a buffer, planting trees. There is some, haying going on and mowing along the river corridor. We're really interested in working with a landowner to essentially, set back those activities so that we can get a little bit more of a buffer established. And then, as many of you have noticed, there's been some pretty dramatic changes.
I don't know you.
Hey, Mark, you're not muted. So there's been some pretty dramatic changes at that Valley Road bridge. And so we're trying to address some of that by removing a really high bank, creating a shallower flood bench that would alleviate some of those high velocity flows, access the floodplain more regularly. So again, these are discrete, small footprint earthwork type of modifications that we would be making to the stream corridor to allow flood waters to exit the channel more regularly. In these sorts of places where there's not development encroaching, there's no infrastructure or utilities at risk, we want water to spread out. And so that's what these designs are intended to do. That was a relatively, I'm going to back up a few slides. That's a relatively lucrative phosphorus reduction project. We're talking $100,000 to $200,000 to implement. That includes engineering, permitting, and planting trees, doing the earthwork, closing out the contract for upwards of 10 kilograms of phosphorus potentially, which gives us anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. We settled on about $14,000 per kilogram of phosphorus. That falls right into the sweet spot for the average reduction rate, the average cost per kilogram of reduced phosphorus. This is a pretty competitive project, and MWA aims to continue working with Fish and Wildlife to progress these designs. There's a lot of details to work out with that, especially with the flood mitigation, the flood levee potential, and it's not the time it's hard to get that conversation on the table right now because there's so much flood disaster recovery still going on that these restoration projects are taking a little bit of a back seat to emergency response projects. So we are still going to work towards developing that project. Moving over to Echo Lake, we really wanted to evaluate West Echo Lake Road. There had been some improvements. There had been severe washouts and then some improvements and then more severe washouts and additional improvements. So we took a really comprehensive approach. We surveyed the entire road, all the channels, all the stream crossings, all the ditches, all the culverts, all the driveway crossings. And we did a full drainage analysis for every point along that road where water crosses either below it or above it, depending on how much it rains. We did a drainage area analysis, determine how many acres drain to that point. What's the runoff coefficient? Is it agricultural fields and water is going to fly right off of it, or is it nice, shallow, deep, thick forest where water is going to take longer to make its way down, or is it a smaller drainage area? And all that information was used to size and place and locate culverts where they really are needed. And overall, we're talking about adding stone line ditches. We're talking about increasing the size and frequency of culverts. We're talking about reorienting culverts so they're not acting as this fire pressurized hose that is blasting away a stream bank and resulting in sedimentation. We're talking about grading the shoulders of the roadways so that water can exit the road. We're talking about creating turnouts off the road so water can disperse into vegetated areas. I think there needs to be a lot of compromise between road right-of-ways and private properties in terms of receiving water, because if we just force the road to handle all the water and we're not willing to take water on our properties, then that water concentrates and then it results in these really dramatic events that blow out. So it is on every landowner's responsibility list to accept runoff from a road. There's legal precedent. It's just the way gravity works. And I think a lot of these improvements will require compromise between the roads and private properties. And it's a tough pill to swallow when your property is 1/4 of an acre. But it's just the way gravity works. And a lot of these improvements, for instance, along the lake, we're trying to add stone line ditches, these red hatch lines. That would be a stone line ditch to try to trap sediment, to try to prevent head cutting along the roadside ditches. These culverts in green, these little diagonals, those are sized, the diameter is sized based on the drainage area. Drainage area 3 acres, you get a small culvert. Drainage area 18 acres, you get a much wider culvert. The other considerations we have are turnouts, or where we've seen impacts to wetlands that have been ditched. We also see a lot of driveway culverts where you'll have a hill with a ditch coming down and it's passing through 3, 4, maybe 5 driveway culverts. And each culvert is like progressively smaller as you go down the hill, which is the reverse of what we really want to see. We want to see culverts being sized appropriately. And so a lot of the work that we proposed on West Echo Lake Road are driveway culvert improvements so that they don't just back water over top, blow out, and then catastrophically blow out the next 1 or 2 or 3 driveway culverts. And so there's opportunities for landowners to work with the towns. Some towns have arrangements where if you buy the pipe, they might put it in for you. So, or what we'd like to see is a couple of neighbors or landowners getting together and upgrading their driveway culverts collectively. You can save money that way by hiring one person to do it. Better yet, if somebody's got a tractor and is willing to do it themselves. But moreover, it's pretty hard to justify doing just one of them if there's 2 problematic ones immediately above or immediately below. So it's like it takes a village, right? The whole drainage network has to be suitable. You can't have that one little weak link or you're still going to face problems. And these are what some of these practices look like. Stone line ditching, that's the most beautiful stone line ditch I've ever seen. They don't usually end up that way. But
Muted, it's okay.
I'm sure the roads folks in Charleston and Morgan are very well suited and experienced in doing these upgrades. Some of them can be, little check dams such as this one. There's a lot of rules and regulations on town roads in terms of how far off the shore or how much or what type of stone you need for a certain percent slope. These are things that are available in published resources like the Better Roads Manual. And that's what our designs are based on. These are based on tried and true practices, Vermont Agency of Transportation standards, and also practices borrowed elsewhere in the country. So we are providing these designs to the towns and have met with the towns following us providing them designs to emphasize that this is a roadmap. It's not a, an order to implement immediately. These items can be kind of chipped away at progressively, so long as you're working on this, a singular little catchment at a time, so that your improvements aren't being lost before, with the next storm. You want them to be resilient. You got to build them in sequence, right? These are more practices, just examples of what these BMPs might look like. And these are really applicable for private driveways and private roads too. So like, we provide these designs for the town, but there's nothing stopping a landowner with a really steep driveway or a really poor drainage to utilize these sorts of practices and draw from these standards, so that driveways and private roads or association-based private roads can have the same good functioning, proper drainage and flood resilience, right? Protect the lake. We did the same thing for Toad Pond Road. This was a very eye-opening event from this past summer. Gabby and I had already peppered this road with, as she'll say, dots and lines prior to the July 2024 floods, and the damages just confirmed our what we had suspected, that it was a very vulnerable road and a very concentrated drainage network. And so our designs for this focused on just disconnecting the drainage network wherever possible, spreading the water out. This is going to be, if implemented at whole scale, this is a very expensive project. This is over $500,000. There's a ton of crushed stone. There's a ton of culvert pipes that'll be required. A lot of earthworks, engineering for the upstream, Sucker Brook crossing. We're talking, $50,000 per kilogram of phosphorus if you go based on this kind of calculator that we use for these practices. It proposed 12 kilograms of phosphorus could be reduced. Well, I don't know about you all, but I think more than 12 kilograms of phosphorus came off that road this summer. And so I think that's a gross underestimation. And we did rebuild the road, and we did the town of Morgan did upgrade a lot of those structures. But I think there's still opportunities to improve flood resilience and try to prevent further washouts from happening again. So those practices look very similar to the West Echo Lake Road, upsizing pipes based on the drainage areas, adding turnouts. A lot of these turnouts need to go onto private land because there's nowhere else to put the water. So being able to accept that water and putting in the practice correctly, so it's not affecting your improvements on the property, are important but necessary. Lots of stone and line ditching. For instance, down at the bottom of Toad Pond Road, there's actually a storm drain system. And that thing became so overwhelmed during the floods that it completely backed up, and all that water went across Route 111. That's a system that probably needs to be upgraded, because who knows when it was built. It could have been built in the 40s or 50s. And we're getting a lot more liquid precipitation these days. This practice goes, or these design packages, we're just showing you a couple of sheets, but it goes all the way up to the top of the road. This is a 2-mile road, and there are best management practices recommended along the entire way. So again, this is a roadmap for the towns to use. They can go out, verify, like, okay, well, this design recommends a 36-inch pipe here. When we replaced it, we put in a 30-inch pipe. Are we comfortable with that, or would we want to upsize it? So this is essentially a checklist, a fail-safe that the towns can use to evaluate the improvements that have been made, or the improvements that still need to be made. We're moving back to Echo Lake here. This is the access area, Fish and Wildlife. There has been some talk about improvements on this property for drainage. Some work has already been done by Holly Wall to establish some better buffer planting areas. And those are great steps. We did submit this design set to Fish and Wildlife's access area manager. And there are certain things that we can and can't do on access areas. 1, you're not allowed to swim. 2, you're not allowed to picnic. It is first and foremost a boat launch. It is not a access for any other purposes, technically. So what that means is, we had proposed a little stone infiltration staircase down to this kind of little bit of a crescent beach. can't do that. Can't encourage swimming or other uses at a boat ramp because it's unsafe and it's technically the rules. So if people were interested, we could potentially plant off this entire corner and try to protect runoff that's coming off West Echo Lake, or capture runoff that's coming off West Echo Lake Road. We could try to use some driftwood log stabilization practices that we've done elsewhere to prevent further shoreland erosion, very moderate shoreland erosion in this little corner here on the southwest. What you see in red is a proposed improvements for a stone line ditch. We also have what was called a broad-based dip, which is a very shallow, very broad water bar, more or less, that would go across the top of the boat ramp and could discharge, runoff from the parking lot into either little depression, bio infiltration areas, or a full rain garden of sorts. This is what the schematic would look like for those steps. Unfortunately, we can't go through the steps, but potentially we could plant that whole area as a buffer. These are, this is a longitudinal profile for how that stone checked, the stone checks in that stone line ditch would look. That's a practice that Fish and Wildlife was receptive to. They said, well, we already have that. It's really hard to clean out because it's fully lined in stone. But what we're proposing are these stone lined steps and then a soft bottom basin that can be shoveled out with, a spade and a bucket, rather than requiring heavy equipment to come in and pull out all the stone, clean out the silt, and then reset it. The other things is, there are examples of lake associations. I think Seymour's one of them, that have put rain garden type practices at an access area and have taken the obligation of maintaining them, because there are 2 people at the Fish and Wildlife Department who are responsible for managing 200 access areas, and they can't physically, and they don't have the funding to manage those sorts of maintenance items like a rain garden would require twice a year, clean out and maintenance. But perhaps if the Lake Association proposed to adopt those practices and had stewards to maintain them, we could persuade Fish and Wildlife to allow some of these discrete practices. The staircase is a no-go, but the broad-based dip, the stone checks, potentially some infiltration areas, I think we could make some progress convincing them that they are useful, that they're valuable, that they can be maintained with local willpower. So those are the designs that we produced. Again, those are just like some rapid fire example sheets from each of the design packages. There's more pages for each of those if you want to peruse. Gabby did some really lovely photo renderings for the Echo Access Area one. There's a bunch of engineering, details for the other ones. So this is kind of our review slide from those projects, right? We just yesterday got feedback from the access area manager about Echo. We can propose some modifications to those designs. We don't have budget to do any design revisions, but if there's a lot of groundswell support from the Echo Association that they want to see some of these practices in, we might be able to get some of those things done in the spring, and if maintenance obligations are being taken on by some local partners. The Sucker Brook floodplain project, we have a lot of details to work out with that in terms of design and engineering and permitting, but MWA will be seeking a final design grant in the next calendar year to move that project forward. We have met with the Charleston road foreman and the select board to go over the designs for West Echo Lake Road. Just essentially make our recommendations known, talk about the priority areas that we discussed. We did just, a few folks from the Echo Association were there and talked about, what could we arrange with driveway culverts? If landowners did want to upgrade their culvert and were willing to buy the pipe, would the town put that in? And I don't remember exactly the answer, but Tom Wagner could probably answer that at the end of this meeting. Similar situation with Toad Pond Road. Morgan's made a lot of investments recently getting that road accessible again, and they have replaced a lot of the pipes. They have had an engineer that they've retained to evaluate for particularly large structure crossings. And the hope is that they use these plans to continue to make those improvements and potentially seek better road grant funds to cover the costs of implementing that. And then, other projects that we haven't explicitly designed yet that are already underway in this watershed are not few and far between. There are a lot. I mean, we've got 4 culvert upgrades that we're trying to do on Valley Road in Morgan. We've conserved a bunch of property in Valley Road. We're working on a flood buyout of a house that took a lot of damages this summer up on Valley Road. MWA worked with a landowner on West Echo Lake Road to stabilize a stream bank that was washing away and threatening their well and their septic system. So we implemented that work with them in September. We're looking to implement or to host some workshops, which we can go into on these broader recommendations. What we'd like to really do is empower the associations and landowners and community members to tackle a lot of like the low-hanging fruit projects that are technically challenging, that don't require permitting, that don't require engineering or consultations. Getting into the grant world is no small feat, and administering 20 grants that collectively might, or that each of them might be like $2,000 is not feasible. We just can't do that. And so I think a lot of the responsibility at this point is offering resources, technical resources, site visits, recommendations, providing, reference material so that people can know what sort of plants to buy for their buffer, how willow live stake should be installed along the shoreline, what sort of driveway practices should be employed or installed. And I think folks from Northwoods and folks from Orleans County Conservation District and NWA are really eager to teach people that, to implement that, to be essentially a one-off consultation. We're like, yeah, this is the right idea. What I'd love to see here is an open top culvert that spills your driveway water into the woods over there, rather than has it run down into your, shoreland frontage. And there are a lot of other things that the Lake Association and the towns can do, like continue with the Lakewise. You guys are at the Star Lakes in the state for Lakewise. Keep convincing your neighbors to do those no-mow zones. Keep convincing them to replant lawn, take away the lawn and replant, shrubbery or perennial gardens along the shoreline. Prevent further development. I mean, that's literally the most important thing is preventing additional loss of shoreline habitat, right? And vegetation clearing. Like implementing small scale stormwater management projects. There are so many projects, or just not even projects, just like little tweaks, management tweaks, behavioral tweaks that could or should be made on these really small camp properties, like disconnecting your gutters, or ensuring your driveway doesn't go straight to the lake, or stabilizing that access that you have down to the water so that it doesn't continue to erode or wash away. Drip infiltration trenches below your gutters, all sorts of very small practices that are easily available and easily implemented by folks who are just landscaping crews. Like there's a lot of work that can be done at the landowner level. What we'd also love to see are like retaining walls. If your retaining walls is concrete or timber or stone and it's collapsing, there are practices nowadays that are employed that are using biodegradable materials, erosion resistant fabrics and blankets, and vegetation to establish living shorelines that function much like a retaining wall and can stabilize your shoreline, but also provide habitat, also provide filtration of runoff, also provide beautification. So getting rid of those armored shorelines and replacing them with restored natural shorelines is a long-term kind of broad recommendation. There's a lot of things that can be done underground that we can't necessarily see, particularly with septics. This whole LWAP doesn't address septic, so that's a regulatory thing. It's impossible to do, 1,800 septic system assessments, in this sort of framework. But hosting a septic social, which is a workshop put on by a lake association or conservation district, where experts are brought in to train landowners on how to recognize, how old is my septic? Is it functioning? Is it failing? Could there be retrofits or improvements? Do I need a whole new one? If so, what type of septic system should I consider? Those are really important. A lot of these properties used to be camps, and now they're homes. And with that, you go from a cesspool to hopefully a full-blown septic system, but that's not always the case. With heavier usage, with more frequent usage, septic systems are going to need to be upgraded. And I know it's kind of this, elephant in the room lurking underground, but it's this really big black box that we can't really put our finger on in terms of what role it plays in the watershed. So, septic socials and encouraging septic system upgrades and other homeowner BMPs and workshops is really important. I know the conservation district is working with a couple of the farms that are in the basin. There's only four functioning farms, as far as I'm aware, of large or medium scale jurisdiction. And there are some practices that can be implemented on those farms. Again, regulatory, so not really falls in the scope of this LWAP, but there are buffers that can be planted. There are gullies that can be stabilized. There's runoff and manure fertilization practices that can be improved. And I know that the Conservation District is working with at least two of the farms to explore, and Vermont Land Trust to explore overlay easements, adding water quality protections on top of an agricultural protection so that we can get stream setbacks and add buffers to those streams. And the landowner will get compensated for losing that production land, right? I know that there's also efforts to enroll some of the farms in CREP, which is essentially a buffer planting program that pays the landowner for giving up that frontage along the stream, put it into woody vegetation, and get compensated for losing that production land in terms of hay. There are rules and regulations. As much as nobody really likes more rules and regulations, there are some that are applicable and should be considered in both of these towns and watersheds. One, river corridor bylaws. I think there's like 15% of the state has adopted the river corridor protection bylaws. Both towns should consider that. There's a lot of streams. There's a lot of high energy streams that have flood and fluvial erosion potential. It's important to ensure that setbacks are maintained from that top of bank so that the stream can be stable. It can flood. It has a woody buffer alongside of it. Town should really consider adopting river corridor bylaws. It's a climate resilient strategy. It's a development sensibility strategy. It's a water quality protection strategy. Westmore has a vegetative buffer disturbance permit. If you want to cut trees along a buffer in Westmore, you have to get a permit. This goes above and beyond the Shoreland Protection Act and shoreland permit. I think both of these towns should consider that. Obviously, that would apply for the entire town, and Charleston is much bigger than just Echo Lake. But that's a very simple addition to a town bylaw that you have a model right next door in Westmore to draw from. One challenge with that is, how do you enforce it, right? That's where the lake association and neighbors, being neighbors, can keep an eye on each other and inform each other. Hey, that technically there's a rule for that. This is a little bit of a stretch, but stormwater management, when you're displacing native vegetation and bringing in sod grass or hardscape landscaping or rooftops or driveways, you are creating that much more runoff potential, right? And so there are rules about construction stormwater permitting and square footage of imperviousness. There are many communities in the western part of the state that are looking into stormwater bylaws. It's an option. It's not, I'd say, the most important piece of the puzzle, but it's up for consideration. And then just continue working with towns, road associations, and people with long driveways. We really got to address these driveways and these roads. One of my favorite ways to describe it is a lot of these roads were built 200 years ago for a horse logger, and now they are supposed to pass 2 18-wheelers. And they're not built for that. They're not built for climate change induced flooding. And so it's been a century and a half of building roads, and it's going to probably be a century and a half of upgrading roads. But just chipping away at them and figuring out which ones need to happen first is part of our job, part of E-Trans job, part of the road foreman's job. But if most driveways have a culvert, most lakeshore driveways drain to the lake. And so trying to manage that runoff responsibly is in everybody's best interest. I've been talking a lot. What I said is mostly written on this screen. I don't think I've missed much, but I think I'm going to kick it back to Bevan to go over kind of the next steps in terms of what lake associations and landowners can do.
Yeah.
How does that sound, Bevan?
That sounds good. And we're doing really good on time, Patrick. So
All right. Okay.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Patrick and Gabby, again, for all your great work and these summaries. These two slides in particular, well, you'll get all of Patrick's slides. These two with the specific strategies and the broader recommendations. I'll make sure you guys get those. And I really like, that's what Patrick emphasized to me when we chatted, was if you guys wanted to create a plan of attack, just driveways, helping people, you know, have a group of you that goes out and helps them look at their driveways and invites Northwoods, or helps them get the BMP fact sheets from Lakewise for open top culverts. And so there's a lot you guys can do with just, that's sort of one of those low hanging fruit. I'm going to go ahead and share my last slide. It's not much.
And one idea we have to kind of kick that off, and Bevan, let me know.
Yeah,
if
go
I'm
ahead.
Step on your toes here about, you know, workshops in the spring.
Yes.
We have, you know, it's idea of putting on a workshop for the Lake Association folks to attend, essentially training. You know, like we think we have a landowner who would be willing to allow us to work on their shoreland, their driveway, and a river and a stream bank, right? Planting buffers, cutting, harvesting, transplanting, installing live stick, willow, and dogwood cuttings, addressing erosion along a driveway, and installing a culvert properly. These are things that I think we could do in one day on a single workshop on one property that touches 3 different work sectors. And if we can essentially train and teach local champions as to how to implement this work, what should it look like, what questions to ask, what might or might not need a permit, who should I call to do this work if I'm not physically capable of doing it? You know, we're happy to do that. What we can't do is do that for every single landowner, one after the other, right? Because we've got literally $1 million worth of grants that we're trying to administer and complete at the same time. And I don't want to speak for Maria or Meg, but they probably can't deal with every driveway open top culvert either. So it's one of these things where if we're going to make this happen at scale, we have to start training people at scale.
Yeah, like I think last time I asked Meg, her waiting list is 20 into the years ahead. So they already have a lot of people requesting their help with implementation. Yeah, so just to kind of reiterate and move on from what Patrick is, piggyback on what Patrick's saying about next steps. So basically, the actionable part of the plan is you can go through all these project summaries, find these low-hanging fruits, whether it's driveways or planting buffers. And part of your leadership from your lake associations is already working on combing through those project summaries. So I'm going to invite them to speak a little bit about their thinking on how to move forward with this project, this plan. So a couple of next steps from us. So the Orleans County Conservation District is excited to announce a new position. We are going to be hiring a lake watershed program specialist. So this is our 4th LWAP, and you know, each LWAP has generated 70 to 100 potential projects. Again, I want to reemphasize what Patrick said. For MWA or the district or Northwoods to be your project manager is probably the best bet for these bigger, more expensive projects. We probably wouldn't be the person to lead the smaller, less expensive projects. So our new position, which I think we're going to try to fill soon in the new year for the Lake Watershed Program Specialist, that's going to be, you know, I was mostly doing community engagement and outreach and managing the LWAP. This person's going to have a little more technical expertise to help be the project manager for implementing projects, kind of like what Patrick does. So I wanted to announce that. And then, just for you guys to keep focusing on the programs and campaigns that are out there. Lakewise is so great. It's like such a great way to connect with people and encourage them to take these tiny steps, leading people to the Lakewise website, leading them to the best management practice fact sheets, these awesome fact sheets that Allison has, leading them to Allison Marchione, who's on the call if you guys have any questions. So those are some of the next steps. The big next step is, of course, how do we implement or install all these identified projects? And we have developed a new handout. We've got 3 new handouts. The way I described there is a little odd. We have one called Lake Shoreline Restoration Sequencing. So explains to you what that process looks like to go from a project that's identified to design, to getting funding, to actually installing it. And then operation and maintenance is the last part of that. So we have a handout to explain that, which I'll show you in a minute. We've also created what are the funding opportunities to kind of summarize that. And then we've been trying to do a lot of outreach and training of contractors. So site workers, landscape designers, engineers. We just had a really great training this late summer at Crystal. And I've developed this list of key contacts that we would recommend. And I've shared that with some of the Lake Association leadership, and that will be on our website. So getting some good resources for you. And so I want to show you some of them really quickly, and then I put the links in the chat, and we'll also do a follow-up email with all of these resources. So we developed something called the Lake Shoreline Restoration Project Sequencing. It explains how MWA and the Conservation District and Northwoods, how we work together and the different roles we have in terms of going after the grants or doing the design. So it explains kind of the phases. We start with project development. We got to get the project identified. Then you actually design it. And part of our grant contract for the Echo LWAP was these 30% preliminary designs. That was a part of our deliverables. So we've done the preliminary design for 4 projects, but any project you identify at some point has to go through design, then how it gets implemented. So it's supposed to just kind of help people understand this process. The next page has some example of what it cost, typical timelines, and then some examples of projects that have been out there. So we have that resource now, and again, that'll be on our website. And we also have, show you the summary of funding, which just kind of goes over where we or you can apply for grant funding. So those resources will all be available to you. What else did I want to say? I've always been curious about the Raise the Blade campaign, and I don't know how much you guys have done that around here, but you can just do your own Raise the Blade campaign. This comes from Champlain, but you could get yard signs made, and it's just something that people can plop down in their yard, and then their neighbor asks them, oh, what does Raise the Blade mean? So it's just, getting people to understand no-mow or just raising the blade. So I think that's a great, easy campaign that you guys could do. And I think that is mostly it. I'm just going to look at my notes to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. And then we can open it up to questions. Oh, but first I'm going to pass it over to my Lake Association contacts. So again, there will be a public folder. We will give you the link that has all the shareable documents that we're required to share with you, including the final report once it's finalized. Right now it's in draft state. Do add your email to the chat if you want to be on our email list. And also, if you could click on the link to the survey, I'll put it in there one more time. And we will send out an email with the recording of this meeting, with our presentations, and any resources we've also recommended. And now I would like to invite Tom Wagner and Rhonda Shippey from Echo and Seymour, respectively, to just kind of share some reflections on their ideas of what they might want to do and help your lake associations and community members move forward with actionable items. So can you guys unmute yourself?
Yeah. Who do you want to go first?
Why don't you go, Rhonda?
Okay. Take it away. Well, first and foremost, thank you all for this incredible job of identifying projects that are needed. The extent of projects at 100 is extensive. we've had one brief meeting after we got the draft plan, and I think the first thing I said is we have to try not to be overwhelmed, and get discouraged. And not discouraged, but not to be overwhelmed and to take it piece by piece. Perhaps identify some low-hanging fruit of projects that we can help reach out and help landowners with. And then to share those successes with all of our members and landowners, so that they can see the positive results. I think the workshop that you talk about on one property with 3 different approaches to protection is excellent, and anything we can do to help you with that. And our partnership with Echo Lake, I speak for Seymour, in that has been one of the most rewarding parts of this whole project. I really feel Echo and Seymour are strategically linked. We're one big watershed, and I really do feel like we're good partners. So I look forward to continuing that with things like workshops. Obviously, we need to sit down with our select board and talk about what their plans are and make sure that they are considering going forward with things and possibly zoning changes. I am curious, Patrick, if you thought about recommending, Morgan doesn't have floodplain regulations. If you think that would be something the town should consider. The other thing, culvert maintenance, there's so much work around undersized culverts and culverts, but I'm guessing if once people get culverts, they should be checking them and making sure they're not clogged. And is there a handout we could put together for people with culverts in their driveways and such? And even the town, I don't know if towns have regular practices of checking and maintaining culverts. And then there's the project, all of the projects, it's our intent to go through and identify, let the landowners where projects were identified know about them, and then reach out to them. And then bottom line, as I say, don't get discouraged. And I do want to mention that if any landowner is interested on the Seymour side, our water quality co-chair Tracy Becken welcomes them to reach out to her, and I'll post her email in the chat. And again, don't get discouraged, and remember that we have 2 of the most pristine lakes. Despite all we've just looked at, we still have 2 of the most pristine lakes in the state of Vermont, and we should be very proud of them.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. That was excellent. Really interesting.
Take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Rhonda. That was excellent. So on behalf of the Echo Lake Association's LWAP committee, I have to say also it's been a great pleasure to work with Bevan, Patrick, and Gabby. They have done a extremely thorough and comprehensive analysis of the threats to the watershed, and they've given us a plan to move forward with and enhance our water quality. And as you said, it can be pretty overwhelming and daunting when you look at that list. I think the thing that we have to do is, first of all, identify just how we're going to tackle this. And so for us, the first step is to get the buy-in from the Echo Lake Association board and get some direction from them. But anyway, that will be step number 1 for us. The 2 project designs on Echo are very high visibility areas that will result in a major improvement to our water quality. And it's encouraging it already that we have an agreement in principle from the town of Charleston. Thank you, Patrick, and for the work you've done to help with that. Also, we want to thank Holly and Alice Marchione, who's the Vermont State Lakewise Assessor, for helping secure a commitment, and Patrick, of course, as we heard tonight, to help redesign the fish and wildlife access. So a fish and wildlife access can be a lake-wise property, and the goal would be to make that into a lake-wise property using the best management practices. So we look forward to doing those. Patrick and his team has also identified on Echo. I don't know how many more out of that 100 you've added, but when we were at 94, there were 23 other projects on Echo. Some are grand, some are small. So as I said, it's now we're looking for direction from the association board and the LWAP committee to develop a roadmap that will outline a strategy so that we can plan a timeline for completing all the projects and identify the ones that we really want to work on. Also, likewise, I've also enjoyed really working with our counterparts at Seymour. Rhonda and Tracy and Peggy Barter have been really great, and I look forward to continuing that collaboration. We did have a couple of workshops this past summer that were really went over very, very well, and I hope we can continue doing that with the theme of tackling all these projects so that we help the landowners understand what needs to be done and perhaps in some cases realize that it's a fairly simple fix. So looking forward to going forward. Thank you.
Awesome, Tom. Thank you. That I have a little reflection about that, sort of like these high visibility projects. So I'm a communications person, so I think about like, how do you guys capitalize or help us, or someone can lead using those high visibility moments for education and communication, and just like, like the Seymour Lake access, they have signs, and so we should continue to have conversations about what we do with those high visibility projects. Is it a press release? What are all the different ways we can communicate it? So that will be a good project to work with us. And so we're right on time. This is excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm really excited. I think there's like 37 people on that aren't worker bees like me. So that's awesome that your community is really showing up for this. We're going to open it up now to questions and answers and reflections. So you can put a question in the chat, you can raise your hand, and I'll either unmute you or you should be able to unmute yourself. And again, if you want to raise your hand, you click at the bottom bar next to chat, the react with the heart. And I should look to see if anyone's has their hands raised. I'm going to stop my share. Oops. Let's see.
I do want to start by saying to Rhonda's comment, it might be overwhelming and it might be just, I guess, discouraging or daunting is the word I like to use. You'll never look at a culvert the same way again once you drink our Kool-Aid. But things can always be improved, right? Things are working pretty well at the moment, but there's always room for improvement. And I think this area has the culture for making small changes at large scale that have big cumulative effects. So I hope that's slightly uplifting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I don't see any raised hands. Feel free to just unmute and share a reflection.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah. So Patrick, when you're looking at culvert sizes on the town roads, do you also look at the culvert sizes downstream that are crossing private roads and what the implications might be if you're potentially channeling more water into the town road culverts? What happens downstream?
Yeah, typically, John, we walk up or down the stream from start to finish, and we'll, inventory any culvert that we come across. So we're not just driving the roads looking at those streams or looking at those crossings. And I think Gabby and I flagged 180 culverts during this assessment, and depending on what the downstream, it's all site specific, right? Depending on what the downstream condition is, a private culvert might be better than a road culvert. It's really dependent. What we worry about in particular, on like a classic Vermont hill slope road, is you'll have a stream crossing perpendicular or maybe not. It's going under a road, and it's got a small pipe. And that pipe might get clogged with debris or just overwhelmed with the volume of water to the point where it's backwatering, it's ponding, right? And it either is going to go over the road and across and wash out that pipe, Or if the shoulder is lower, then it's gonna go running down the ditch. And then if it runs down the ditch, it's picking up speed. And if it's going and clogging the next culvert down the ditch, then you're gonna have this unzippering, which is exactly what happened on Toad Pond Road. So that's why, with those culvert designs we put together, we went really big with both drainage in terms of sizing the pipe based on the drainage area, but also based on like the debris that could come down and clog that pipe. The other thing that we often see is you might have a stream coming down at 5 or 10%, and then it hits a culvert, which is installed at 1 or 2%. And then that culvert has a 3-foot drop to get back down to the stream grade. And what that does is it forces sediment to build up on that upstream side of the culvert because it doesn't have enough energy to push through the pipe anymore. And then what you get on the other side of the pipe is this waterfall, which just scours and scours and scours. And so that's why we're so fixated on culverts, because they often blow out roads, and then they often blow out the streams. And with all of that out of whack, it's impossible to say exactly what's going to happen downstream if you don't really know what the next storm is capable of doing. So it's really, they often are kind of like the underlying cause of most of the issues that we come across, is just these stream, road, driveway crossings. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it's a self-interest question of sorts. I'm on West Echo Lake Road. The town culvert failed 2 years in a row. You showed a picture of it actually at the beginning here of one of the failures on that. And that in turn washed out our road, our private road going down to the lake, which in turn dumped a lot of sediment into Echo Lake. But I'm just, wanting to plan ahead on the culverts that are crossing our private road as to the changes that are going to happen on West Echo Lake Road. What are the implications for us? I don't want the culvert to wash out. That we have, we've got like 3 culverts going across the road to the lake, So anyway, I just need some help in terms of thinking about what the you make a change one place, as you make a change one place, it has implications for other places. And one of the reasons I think that Echo Lake Road, this is my own opinion, Echo Lake Road washout is that the floodplain above the road had been modified by draining the fields there so that they didn't have that floodplain any longer. That didn't hold back the water, but I think that's past. It has implications sort of beyond.
Yeah, I guess one easy way is like if you're on a stream, if you're crossing a stream on your driveway, and you know that 500 feet up the hill the road crosses that same stream, your pipe shouldn't be any smaller than that next uphill pipe. If anything, it needs to be bigger, right? So that's kind of like the quick and dirty.
Yep.
Patrick, well, people think if they might have more questions, you want to just share your screen and just show the final report? We call it the plan and the final report, but the official document's called the final report, even though it's called a Lake Watershed Action Plan.
Yeah.
You have it. Just kind of show people the content. But like you said, the real actionable stuff is more like in the project summaries, which are in
I would say
Yeah.
you're not going to see much here, but it's 40 glorious pages of text and I think 19 pages of maps. So you definitely want a couple cups of coffee. But this is a amalgamation of like everything we've done, more or less. And so you can go back and look at all sorts of background information and kind of the methods, but really what you're probably most interested in are chapter 4 and 5, where we talk about how projects were prioritized, which ones floated to the top, and then those kind of immediate next steps and just kind of broader recommendations and suggestions. So that's kind of the meat and potatoes of it, is that chapter 5 in terms of like, what is the most actionable things taken from this report? That's where I would I would spend my time.
Nice. Yeah, it's kind of just the place where it all goes. Do Ben or Allison or any other people from our state agencies have any reflections they want to share or interesting takeaways about the project? I know people are excited about the floodplain project. Feel free to say any comments, Allison or Ben or Mark. Who else is on? Pete? Pete
That's
and Maria.
Great job.
Thanks,
Always great working both with these lake communities, with MWA and the Orleans Conservation District. You guys did a great job. You barely needed me for anything.
Thank you, Allison. Ben, do you have any comments on the floodplain project or?
No, I mean, I guess I was just gonna echo that, you know, this has been we've been working in these lakes for many, many years. And so I know these lists do seem a little bit daunting, but I do think it creates this great resource for the long term. And that some of these projects do take some time. It takes some time sometimes for landowners to kind of see other projects go in and get interested in them. And then, you know, obviously it takes time to build that capacity to do those smaller individual projects as well. So just to say that I think we're, from the state's perspective, here to support all the local partners. You know, it's been great seeing the Conservation District and the Memphremagog Watershed Association kind of take on a real leadership role in supporting all these efforts. So we're definitely pretty far in the background, but but we're also here to support all the folks to get these things done. So.
And did I explain like the purpose of the LWAP, how you guys came up with it and why you like that as a format? Do you have any comments about that? I was able to do it. All right. Any other? Oh, I see a raised hand. Kelly. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. This was so exciting for me to watch. I don't know if, for those who don't know I have been monitoring Vermont's inland lakes for the last 25 years. And what we have been, we found that the nation is actually EPA's latest report from the National Lake Assessment that was based on data from 2022 found that the nation is losing its oligotrophic lakes on a continental scale. So from 2012, over a 10-year period, to 2022, the nation's percentage of oligotrophic lakes decreased by half. So we lost half of the nation's oligotrophic lakes in the last 2 years. So you guys are stewarding some of the last best remaining lakes in the nation. And we know that these lakes have had increasing trends in phosphorus. You still have amazingly good water quality. You're still in the oligotrophic range. And this information that was presented today is really the keys to stewarding these lakes into the future and saving really the best of what's left, not only in Vermont, but in the nation. And so I'm really excited. I know that there's 100 projects. I'm just excited that you guys found all of that stuff to do, because, if there was just 5 projects and they were all really too expensive, then you would have, be discouraging. But you've got 100 things to choose from, and, you've got time. And, I think Peggy is on, I see, and, she was really integral when Seymour first noticed they had an increasing phosphorus trend years ago, and you guys over a 10-year period were able to work to flatten that curve. So it's possible. And I think that, but we didn't have, this lake watershed action plan type of thing back then. And so now that we do, and the information that was presented today, I'm just really encouraged. This was so satisfying for me. And you all should feel really great about your opportunities ahead, because now you have a really good list to work on, and that's like a to-do list, and you can get down to it. And I love that they prioritize the stuff for your road foreman as like ways to do upgrades, because that's really critical piece of it, and that's again really doable. So anyway, just want to share with you how wonderful this made me feel, and has given me tremendous amount of hope for both Echo and Seymour. So
Aw,
Great job, guys.
thanks, Kelly, and thank you for the compliments to Peggy, because she has been an amazing champion. She's told me she's aging out. I said, no aging out. You can pass the torch, but thank you so much. That made me have a thought. Oh, Patrick was, just to give you guys an example of earlier LWAPs, I think Eden was one of the first. And Patrick was saying that they've actually like done most of their projects in their list. Patrick, did you find any more information about that? I mean, that really makes it sound like the LWAP is pretty darn actionable.
To be perfectly honest, I don't know enough. I was invited to an event that was hosted by the association. I think it was Eden, actually, that said they were working to implement their last project.
Wow.
I do want to add a caveat that I'm pretty sure it's a lot fewer than 100.
Yeah, they didn't
and-
probably have as many.
and
Do you know,
I wanted,
Allison? Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wanted to. Oh,
Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah,
I
go
wanted to deal. Actually, go ahead. This is more relevant. I got a different topic.
I was just going to confirm, yes, Eden was one of the first 2 LWAPs that we funded in the state. And I do think they have implemented several projects from their LWAP. They definitely have fewer than 100 projects. And I think maybe the all of it is the all of the initial prioritized designed projects.
Wow.
Not all of the projects from the LWAP, because it's been maybe like 5 years since that LWAP was completed. And I think they've done 4 or 5 projects. So yes, they are absolutely implementable. You guys can do it.
Ah, yay, go team. All right, well, let us wrap unless anyone has any final questions or
I
comments.
just wanted to share
Patrick.
one more screen. So Gabby is a whiz with GIS and online maps, and I put this link in the chat, and I hate this banner. Go. Okay. So this is our data library. You all have seen this. There's a lot of layers and whatnot on here, roads and private driveways and endangered species and streams. But what I want to show you is the stars. Those stars are all those projects that we talked about. So a lot of stars on the West Echo Lake Road, a lot of stars up on Wayeesie Shore. And so you can click on these stars and it'll tell you information about it. And this little project ID is your index. So we're going to be providing each lake association with a truncated project summary sheets that are just relevant to your watershed. So you don't have to sift through all of Seymour's to get to the juicy Echo ones, right? But this is your index code. So when you're looking, okay, I know that this is my property and that's a project. You want to take that 402, which means forestry project number 2, and you can cross-reference it with the list of projects for your lake watershed, and you can find more information. All of these deliverables will be compiled neatly for Bevan to disseminate and for the lake associations to curate and manage. And then I think that's all I had to say.
Yeah, because people at the prioritization meeting asked, well, how can I find out if my property was prioritized or is in the list of 100? So this is how because they probably know by looking at these stars, they can find themselves.
Yeah. And the lake associations are also in possession of what we call the shoreland prioritization list, which essentially takes all the properties along the lake shore that we went through on our shoreland assessments on the boat and then again on over maps. And we made recommendations or prioritized every one of those properties. In Echo, I think there's like 60, and in Seymour there's like 150 or something. And those little spreadsheets contain those project opportunities that are too small to be a purple star, right? So if it's a 40-foot long, 10-foot wide buffer that this tiny little camp could implement, we didn't turn that into a project summary because nobody's ever going to get a grant to do that. But the lake associations have all that information. So you can cross-reference both of those. The purple stars are the bigger projects that may or may not warrant a grant or engineering or design or permitting. Those lakeshore spreadsheets, the prioritization, those are the ones where you can be that point of contact from the lake association, talking to your neighbor and say, hey, we see here that there were opportunities to do so and so. What do you think?
Yeah, Tom's good at that. And Tracy. He'll ask anyone to do it. Well, thanks, guys. Unless you can stay on or leave, stay on if you have any remaining questions. But thank you again for participating and caring and being an active member of your lake communities and helping us steward these lakes. And we are here to be a resource. So reach out to us anytime. Thank you so much, guys.